Here we are again with the show where we answer because you have asked. It is Ask GC Anything, and the first of those questions this week comes in on Twitter from Edwin. I never use a saddlebag, so is there an alternate, compact and effective solution to carry your saddlebag stuff? Hashtag talkback. Remember that one for asking your questions on Twitter.
Now, I never used to use a saddlebag, but of late I have, because it means I don't have to have my pockets absolutely rammed full of stuff, which can be really uncomfortable and actually does rather stretch the limits of your rather expensive cycling jersey as well. And then, because your pockets are so full, it's actually very difficult to get anything out in the first place. So saddlebags are pretty good, but there are other alternatives.
Yeah, there are. Of course, they have developed over the years, haven't they? From looking like basically a leather briefcase underneath your saddle to what they are now, which is, in my mind, quite neat and compact. And I have always used saddlebags ever since I first started cycling to carry my spares. Like you said, your jersey can get so weighted down, it almost pulls below the saddle anyway. You might as well have a saddlebag. There are, though, other alternatives. We did a questionnaire not too long ago. Most pros use saddlebags. Some of them use a cut-off water bottle, as Matt is displaying now. And we go through some ways of carrying your spares in this next video.
Check it out. May involve karate.
Yep, the half water bottle, neatly packed and then stored inside one of your water bottle cages, which admittedly means that you will take one less water bottle with you, but probably then just good for short rides.
Well, next up we have this question in the comment section from Stephen Hayworth, who asks, how do I avoid potentially lethal moments in gusty crosswinds on deep, but not that deep, profile wheels? At high speed down the horseshoe pass, when a sharp and strong gust steered the front wheel, resulting in a terrifying shimmy.
I've seen you do a few terrifying shimmies in my time, not even on the bike.
I am actually quite a good dancer, you know. Just leave my shimmies out of this. Anyway, that is a really good question. And I do know the Horseshoe Pass very well. A beautiful part of the world over in North Wales. But a long climb, this gradual sweeping bend on it. Very easy to get caught out in crosswinds. Now, I think we should say first up, it is a cracking question, but you should never go out with deep section rims on, really, when it's particularly windy. And of course, the wind generally does catch the front wheel. So if in doubt, and you like having deep sections on, no harm having a deep section at the back, then a box section at the front. That's the first off, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And also you want to think about looking ahead on the road to see where the wind might be affecting you most. So for example, if you're in a tree-lined area or going through hedges and up front you can suddenly see a part where they disappear and it's particularly exposed, that is the point at which you want to really expect an extra gust of wind from the side, which can catch you out if you're not expecting it. Also, grip the bars slightly firmer than you would do normally so that you're able to really react in terms of your steering. And it also helps to get slightly lower at the front end. More weight on the front should mean that the wind has less of an effect on the steering. From that point of view, actually heavier riders do tend to experience this slightly less than featherweight climbers. Up next though, we have got a lot of tips for you in a video entitled How to Deal with Crosswinds.
When you're riding in a group, the rider that's about to come to the front needs to be protected from the wind until the very last moment. So if the wind is coming from the left, for example, then the group needs to rotate counterclockwise. Or here, where the wind's coming from the right, you're going to need to rotate clockwise.
Next up, it's time for the rapid fire round, but before we start, I think I might rename it the steady fire round after your performance last week, Dan. I mean, it was high in quality, but slow in pace. That's what I'm saying. It certainly wasn't rapid fire.
Sorry about that. All right, we better crack on then. Yeah. Paul Lafford asks, hi guys, please tell me what's more beneficial, a complete rest day, doing nothing, or a recovery spin on a so-called rest day? Very good question. We've actually just shot a video on this very subject, so keep your eyes peeled on the channel for that coming up very soon. There isn't much scientific evidence to say that there is a benefit to recovery rides, but there is a little bit. I think what most people advise is to do what feels best for you. So if you come off the back of a complete rest day feeling better than doing a recovery ride, do that, and vice versa.
Well, I always found that having one complete day off the bike in a week is always good. I think from a psychological perspective, you just feel really fresh and you can get stuck into training, because bike riding is pretty hard work. And take a day off, try it, see how you feel.
Definitely.
Next up we have this from BOS. It's ridiculous advice to say listen to your body. I'd never get out of bed.
I don't know what to say to that.
Nor do I, really.
I think we generally mean when you're on the bike as much as anything. Like if you're feeling fatigued and you can't do anything, it's time to take a day off.
Yeah,
Broody asks, I'm a recreational mid-age cyclist training for a 100-kilometre tour next to running a company and a part-time job. What are good cool downs and warm-ups before and after my training that are effective, keep me healthy and are not time consuming? Keep it up. Well, it's an interesting one for cycling. You do need to warm up a bit, but it's not quite the same as doing something like squash or running or football, where you're really kind of extending yourself and jarring your muscles. It's very important to warm them up before you go into a full-blown game of any of those. In cycling, it's more about just warming your motor up gradually, but I think you only really need 10 minutes or so with maybe a couple of 30-second efforts at a very high cadence. Not hard effort, it's just really spinning the legs.
Yeah, it's different if you're going to be riding a 10-mile time trial or a short explosive effort where you do need to do efforts that will replicate the effort you're going to be making in the time trial. But if just going out on your bike, do a bit of stretching as well if you want, if you find that beneficial. But again, there's not a lot of scientific research that suggests that is actually beneficial, but it can feel good. So, but just ease yourself into the ride, a few sprints, off you go.
Yeah, in terms of cool down then, well, that's just a case of spinning for 5 or 10 minutes on your way back home in general. I spoke to Chris Froome a couple of years back, and he says that in his cool down, he actually does a couple of efforts within it. He did tell me the scientific reasoning behind that, but I've forgotten it.
This really is the study far around,
Sorry.
isn't it? No worries,
Right.
but all good
Let's crack
stuff.
on with Filippo Belli then. I'm a student starting cycling on a limited budget. Is it better to buy a higher end used road bike or a lower end new one? That is always a difficult question.
That's a cracker. My view on this is to do some research, invest a bit of time looking at what's out there, but I would go for maybe a higher end used one, but you need to make sure that you're pretty happy with the integrity of the bike and the frame, etc. But you might get a lot more value for money. Or look towards the end of the bike season, you get a new bike that's sort of last year's model, you can get a good deal that way as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, just do your research, do your homework.
Yeah,
Really.
I think if you're going to go for the former and buy a good second-hand bike, you need to have a bit of patience, don't you, to wait for the right one at the right price to come along. But some people out there just like getting their hands on something brand new, and that's fair enough. So each to their own, really. Finally, Luke White says, after races, I'm frequently being told I'm a smooth rider, and have been told this by a number of people I race with. Is being called smooth a bad thing?
No.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
If you've been called a smooth rider, it's generally because you've got a good style on the bike, or you've got particularly well-shaped legs.
Yeah. My ethos was always that since I wasn't very good, I'd try to look at least smooth.
Yeah, that's it. Looking smooth, doesn't matter about the power. If you look smooth, job done.
Next up, a question that comes in from David Roder. Slightly embarrassing, but I'm a new rider with a low FTP of 155 after doing the Zwift test. I'm trying to do zone and sweet spot training, but I live in a particularly hilly area. Just getting up a hill, I'm putting myself into the red fast. Have you got any suggestions?
Well, thanks for getting in touch, David. But first off, don't be embarrassed about having a relatively modest FTP at all, because we all have to start somewhere. And first up, you've got ambition, you're going out on your bike and you're trying to improve yourself. And that's a win in my book. And as long as you're enjoying it, that's just fair enough. But I do sympathise with trying to do sweet spots training in a particularly hilly area, because I live in an area with lots of steep climbs and my ride to work is brutal. And I must admit, I'd just like to ride it at an even rhythm. So yeah, it is quite tough, but there are ways you can address that.
Yeah, definitely. And you've already mentioned the fact that you've done a test on Zwift, so presumably you've got access to that online virtual world. And that could be a great way of doing your initial training, because you've also mentioned you're a new cyclist. So it might well be that your fitness increases quite quickly. You may lose some weight, we don't know exactly what size you are. In which case, say for example, you get to an FTP of over 200 watts in a couple of months, lose a bit of weight, you may well then find that you're going up these climbs at a much easier rate than you were. Likewise, you also need to think about your gearing. It's also not embarrassing to have a triple chain set at the front or a huge cassette at the rear. And that will help you again to get up the climbs at a slower pace with a decent cadence at a lower power as well, which should help you to keep inside that zone. You can also make sure that you tackle the climbs correctly. How to find your rhythm is the video that's coming up next in the very hot and humid Abu Dhabi and Jebel Hafid. Finding your rhythm on the climb and tackling it in the correct way could help you with your cause as well.
46 degrees Celsius.
When you're thinking about climbing rhythm, you should also start to think about any points where you can pick up some extra speed. So are there some points on the climb where the gradient slackens off slightly? And if there are, what you should do is just keep the same cadence and rhythm by clicking down through the gears and picking up some speed.
Finally, on this week's Ask GCN thing, we have this question from somebody called Enslim. What a cracking name for the final question of this week's show. Enz has asked, quite simply, going back to basics, how does a bike work? And the evolution of cycling. Well, Enz, that really is going back to basics, which can, on occasions, be particularly interesting, especially when it comes to the evolution of the humble bicycle well over a century ago.
In fact, we have got a video about this fact and a whole host of other cool facts about facts you didn't know about cycling, in a video entitled Top 10 Facts You Didn't Know About Cycling.
Yeah, so it's not actually a fact because it's more of a rumour, but apparently the first ever sketch of a bicycle was made all the way back in 1493 by a student of Leonardo da Vinci, and his name was Gian Giacomo Caprotti, and it was from that sketch that this replica bike was made in the late 1960s.
Well, that's the end of this week's Ask GCN thing. Thanks to those of you who asked questions. Don't forget to keep sending them in using the comment section below this video, or indeed the hashtag TalkBack on social media.
Indeed. Now, if you haven't already subscribed to GCN, you can do so by clicking on the globe, and that way you won't miss another video. Now, those eagle-eyed viewers amongst you may have noticed we're wearing pink GCN t-shirts, and that can mean only one thing. The Giro d'Italia is upon us, so check out our preview show of the first Grand Tour of the year by clicking just down here.
Incidentally, they are available in the shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. And meanwhile, down here is a video with content provided entirely by our viewers, so thanks very much to all of you. It's entitled Top 9 Steepest Climbs in the World.
And boy, they are steep.